Welcome to episode 87 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Bob Schultz, who is one of the founders of the Great American Pitch Fest. We discuss how pitch fests work and how to get the most out of them, so stay tuned for that. This podcast is brought to you by Final Draft, the industry-leading screenwriting software and recipient of the 2013 Primetime Engineering Emmy Award. From inspiration to fade out, Final Draft software helps you every step of the way. Visit finaldraft.com for more information or to download a free trial copy. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 87. A couple of quick updates. I continually build out the SYS script library. Last week I added the Expendables and Sex Drive. Tim Teets sent them in to me, so thank you, Tim, for those. If you have a screenplay that you do not see listed in the SYS script library, please do email it to me. The SYS script library is completely free. We have over 1,000 scripts in the library, many hit movies, award winners, and television shows. All the scripts are in PDF format, so you can download and read them on whatever device you use. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. If you want to get my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. So I've talked about my script on the blacklist over the last few weeks. It's a crime action thriller. It got a rating of a 4 and a rating of an 8, which averaged out to a 6, which was enough to make the top list. So as of this date, as I'm recording this on August, I think today is August 17th, I'm recording this, I have now had 5 pro downloads. And the most recent pro download, the person actually came back and gave me another rating. They gave me a rating of a 6, so it just basically, it didn't help me or hurt me. It just maintained my average of a 6. I did contact support with a couple of questions, and I did get some clarification on a few things. If you get 2 ratings that are very divergent, if you pay for 2 readers to read your script and you get ratings that are wildly different. I think it's 2 points different, so obviously a 4 and an 8 are very different, but I think even if it had been like a 4 and a 7, I think those are divergent enough. They will give you another read at half price. So instead of $50, it would be $25. And I just, they never reached out to me for that. I contacted them and they said, oh yeah, that is correct. And so they did give me a credit for that. So I could buy another read for $25 instead of $50. Also, when I had Franklin Leonard on the podcast, he mentioned a newsletter that went out once a week, and all the scripts that got a rating of an 8 or better were in this newsletter. So obviously my script got a 4 and an 8. That's 1 8. So I was curious if the newsletter went out and when it went out, and the support emailed me back and said it goes out, I think, at the beginning of the week after. So I think I got my rating of an 8 on like a Thursday. So it would have gone out like the following Monday. And this kind of makes sense because I actually got 3 pro downloads, I think the following like Tuesday. So I got the rating on a Thursday, and then on like a Tuesday, I think I got 3 pro downloads. So that was the biggest single slug of downloads I got. So I'm guessing, I have no real confirmation, but I'm guessing that was from the newsletter that went out on that Monday. Anyway, my listing expires any day now, so I'm just going to let it expire. It's going to fall off the top list any day. If it hasn't already, it probably has, because I think these ratings are over a month old now. So that's basically that. I'm honestly not sure if I'll put my next script on the blacklist. We'll see I'm working on another spec now. So, in 3 or 4 months, I'll start marketing that, and I'll certainly mention it on the podcast, and we'll see if I put it on the blacklist. I've got to kind of just digest how this all went down. So in the meantime, I've been working on putting this project together. Right now, I'm planning on directing and producing it myself. I've been working on this for about a month, but I've held off on announcing it on the podcast. I was afraid if something went wrong, I'd look silly for saying I was going to do it and then not actually following through. But at this point, I feel pretty good about it. I've got some interest from some investors, which I'll talk about in a second. And perhaps this extra layer of accountability from listeners asking me what's going on with this project is actually a good thing. Maybe it will keep me motivated and keep me going and really help me see this thing to completion. So the plan is to spend the next few months raising the money to shoot this film, and then the plan is to shoot it in early 2016, probably like February or March 2016. I'm going to personally invest in this movie myself. I'll be putting in a sizable chunk of money, and it'll probably end up being I'll probably end up being the single biggest investor in this film, but I am going to try and get other investors as well, obviously. What I've been doing so far is, and this is something to consider if you are thinking about producing your own material, what I've been doing is I've been going out to actors who I've met over the years. Some of these actors I know pretty well. Some of them I know not so well, but just people that I've, corresponded with, maybe met a few times. So I'm going out to these actors and seeing if they would like to invest in the movie and also play one of the leading roles in the film. Actors get a tremendous amount of value out of being in a feature film, so it stands to reason they might be interested in investing in something like this. So right now I've got the main lead cast, and I've also got a very small minor role from a fairly new actor, but he would like to be in the film, so he's willing to throw in some money. And then, as I said, I've got another actor who really likes the lead role and is willing to invest in the movie to see this thing get to completion. And obviously the actors have to be right for the role, so I'm only reaching out to actors in sort of a very slow, methodical way, and I'm not like reaching out to 5 actors for the same role. I know certain actors, and I say, well, this actor would be good for this role, and I'm reaching out to them and kind of gauging their interest, and then if they say no, perhaps I'll reach out to some other actors. So once that all shakes out, then I'm going to run a Kickstarter campaign for the rest of the money. I'm very curious to see how well I can do with a Kickstarter campaign. I really like it as a model. It's a way of sort of pre-selling your film and seeing if there's any interest in it before you even make it. And obviously it's a way of generating interest in the film before you even make it. So hopefully when you get your film completed, there'll already be a little bit of recognition for this film. I've become friends with Michael Stagliani, who I interviewed in episode 64. If you remember that episode, he is a writer and former actor, and he was on The Bachelorette and one of the Bachelorette spin-off shows. So he's got a decent social media following, and he's also got one of his friends who was also on The Bachelorette interested in acting in the film too. So I'm casting them as the 2 henchmen who work for this mob boss. I'm hoping that between my own following and their following, we can raise a decent amount of money on Kickstarter, and hopefully I can add a few more people like them to the cast who have a good social media following and are really willing to pitch in and help with the Kickstarter campaign, and hopefully that will really help this thing get off the ground. We'll see. My goal is to have the Kickstarter campaign maybe October, maybe into November. We'll just see how long the first phase of this, as I said, is probably going to be just raising money, talking to people, getting investors, and then whatever we need left, we will go to Kickstarter for. So stay tuned for that. I'll certainly be looking for support once that goes live. A couple of months ago, I talked about my baseball comedy on the podcast, and I got a bunch of emails from people offering to help out with one thing or another. It's really all kinds of different emails. People just offering suggestions, people just offering to actually help out with the film. So I want to thank everybody who reached out to me for that. It is very much appreciated. It also got me thinking. I got such a great reaction from that mention. I'm thinking there's probably lots of talented people who might want to get involved in this current project that I'm working on. So I welcome any help that I can get. Please do reach out to me if you want to help out. It's very much appreciated. Specifically, what I'm looking for right now is an actress, probably aged 30 to about 45. She plays the wife of the main character, who's probably about 45 years old. So, somewhere in that 30, 35, 40-year-old age range, who has a large social media following. I want an actress who has a large social media following who can help out with the Kickstarter campaign. And, you have to be really into it. You have to be willing to go to your audience and really help out. So it has to be more than just having a big social media following. You have to have a large social media following. For this to work, you'd have to have a large social media following, and you would also have to be willing to really, bang on it and try and get interest from your followers. But really, any actors who add value to this package would be welcome. There's a variety of roles still available. Also, I'm planning on shooting a teaser trailer in the next month or so. So I'm looking to work with all sorts of production crew, sound guys, an editor, a cinematographer. This is an action thriller script. So hopefully a cinematographer who has experience shooting thrillers, action thrillers on a low budget, obviously, would be ideal. But at this point, I'm in the early process of this. So whatever your talent or skill is, if you'd like to help out on this project, please do drop me an email. Anyway, hopefully this will be interesting and perhaps even inspirational for people to follow along as I go through this process. Hopefully it'll just be a, kind of a nice case study that people can look to. It's going to go over, as I said, probably by the time this whole process is done, it'll probably be a year long by the time I, raise money, do the Kickstarter, produce the film, get through post. We'll be lucky to be done with this thing by next summer. And I'm recording this now in August. So we'll be lucky to be done by this August in 2016 with this whole process. So hopefully this will be a kind of a case study. People can go back, look at what I did, hopefully learn from it. And I mean, it's going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm doing this live in real time. It's not going to be a retrospective of, hey, here's how this turned out great. This thing might totally flop. So, if it does, maybe we can learn from the mistakes that I'm about to make as well. If you've ever been down this road with doing micro budget films, I mean, things can get really, really tough at times. So there's definitely going to be some tough times ahead with this project. Things don't go as planned when you're talking about micro budget films. A lot of things come up. Some of these actors that say they're going to invest, some of them will drop out. Some of the, the money that we raise on Kickstarter, it will fall through. Some of the things, you get certain crew members, things come up and they get paid jobs and, higher paid jobs and better jobs, and they have to go off. So there's a lot of moving parts in producing a feature film. So I'm sure there's some tough roads ahead. But again, hopefully it'll be an interesting case study for people. So wish me luck. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing Bob Schultz from the Great American Pitch Fest. Here is the interview. Welcome, Bob, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm real happy to be here.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career in the entertainment industry, how you got started and eventually came to creating Pitch Fest and now Script Fest.
I think the early period of my career is a very typical story. Loved movies growing up, loved TV, always wanted to get involved, and loved writing and storytelling. My degree's in English. There's not a lot to be done with a career where I can quote Geoffrey Chaucer from memory, so I decided to sit down and actually start putting some words on paper. I came to screenwriting late, though. I wanted to write stories and books, and I sort of loved the magic of movies and didn't want to ruin that for myself. But as I came to learn about the structure and the minimalist way that you construct a screenplay, the act of writing screenplays really came to appeal to me on its own, even if it wasn't as part of a process of getting a movie made. Eventually, I produced Below Zero, written by my producing partner Signe Olenek, and I've had other scripts produced and optioned along the way. And next thing I knew, here I was having a screenwriting career and running a screenwriting conference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so tell us then, how did the screenwriting conference sort of dovetail from this screenwriting career?
Well, I'm fond of saying that a good writer makes an excellent procrastinator. We, as writers, always find the best way to get your house cleaned is to have a deadline on a screenplay due. So when we decided to start a screenwriting conference at a pitching event, it was a great way to avoid my deadlines, mostly. I was at a conference maybe 12 or 13 years ago, and they had some hiccups and some problems, and my partner said, we can do something better here. And so she came to me and asked for volunteers, and I latched on, and here we are 13 years later. This year, by the end of this year, between the Great American Pitch Fest, the Great Canadian Pitch Fest, and the Great British Pitch Fest in London, we will have done 20 pitch fests in 12 years. Not to mention producing 2 movies along the way and doing our own writing as well. So it's been a little bit of a crazy roller coaster ride, but we're really proud of everything we've done.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's dig into your writing career a little bit just to get a little more background on you. So it sounds like you were when you got out of college, you had an English degree. You started to write novels and then slowly transferred into screenplay writing?
Yeah, short stories mostly, but my love for movies sort of gave me an innate sense of structure without ever actually having gotten any education in it. I had a notion of where to start and end a scene, where to start and end a story, what the beginning and end of the movie should look like. So I sat down and I wrote a screenplay, which, if you'd asked me back then, was a guaranteed Pulitzer Prize winner, and if you ask me today, it's the worst thing I've ever written. We all write Fade to Black for that first time and think that we have just redesigned the entire world. So I went and I learned. I picked up some great books. I picked up Vicky King's book, How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. I picked up Save the Cat, started teaching myself, and started learning that humility that comes from other people can know more than I do about what I'm doing. And I just started cranking them out. I wrote primarily horror at first. I think not only did I watch a lot of horror as a teenager, but I think it's a community that is very, very enthusiastic about the genre, and as a member of the tribe myself, I thought they'd probably be forgiving of me if I had some flaws in my script, and here we are now. The latest one I've written is an action comedy, but I still have a little bit of a fondness for horror back there.
And let's walk through some of those specifics. Okay, so you've written some of these horror scripts. Take us through sort of maybe the first option, the first sale, just the first little bit of success as a screenwriter, and how did you actually do that? Was it pitching? Was it query letters? What was the first bit of success you had?
You know what? I think it was true then, and it's true now, and it's probably always been true. It's a lot of it is who you know. It's connections you've made and the networking that you have done, that I had done, that doesn't just come from a place of here's something that you can do for me. Query letters, I think, are very effective for a lot of people, but you're sort of entering it into a relationship with somebody where you're saying, I have something that I want you to buy from me. And there's automatically that defensiveness, or you become part of the crowd, But it was the early days of the internet, and there were some chat rooms, and there were some, development executives who were just going out there talking about screenwriting. And every night I would go online and I would chat with these people. I'm in upstate New York, 3,000 miles away from LA. And so I couldn't just go to networking functions and mixers. So I'd go down there and I would talk and I'd say, here's what I just finished writing. And someone said, you really need to work on that log line. And I would say, what's a log line? And I know what working is, I just don't know what a log line is. And so they'd explain to me, this is how you get in and so on. But it was never a place of, please read my romantic comedy, please read my horror. It was a question, I had writer's block today, or I had a breakthrough today, or I painted myself into a corner today, and talking with other writers and other development executives about the process of sort of being part of a community. And then, coincidentally, when I went to my first pitching event, one of the guys from the chat room was hearing pitches. He's like, oh my God, you're Bob, come here, sit down. And it was not, I did not sit down and say, it's a story about blah, who has blah, that then does blah, which is what all these logline pitch meetings sort of turn into, was, how you been? Great to see you. What did you just finish? Oh, really? And send it to me, no problem. And so that turned into, that script was not optioned, but they liked enough what I had done to say, well, we have this script that came in from a writer that we hired that really wasn't that good. Try a rewrite on it. So I got some hired work on that. When I was there, they had optioned an unpublished novel from a guy who wrote this. It was a giant moray eel story, Jaws with an eel, and they said, well, we want someone to adapt this book. Have you ever done adaptations before? And since I had done no adaptations, I said, I do adaptations all the time, and they let me do it, and I read the book and made an outline and did it. So it comes from who you know and all that networking, and what I learned from that is how critical it is to know as many people as possible in as short a time as possible and become friendly with them on a professional level, so that you're not just saying, me, I'm the one that you should hire. You're saying, they say, I like Bob, so I like working with Bob, so let's see what Bob can do for me.
I wonder too, have you had any success? I mean, the relationship you just described is, you form it online, but ultimately you need that actual meeting, that sort of in-person interaction. Have you had any success with meeting people online and it never actually goes to an in-person meeting where you just meet someone online and they eventually hire you to do something, or you've written and, they read one of your scripts or option one of your scripts? I'm just curious if that step is mandatory, in your opinion.
In my opinion, it is extremely critical. Mandatory. I'm not willing to say mandatory as you and I speak across the internet. We've never met in person, but it's getting more and more the case every day that you can do more and more through technology. But speaking as someone who's also produced a few movies, it's a very, very stressful time to produce a movie. It's 2 years at least of extreme stress, and building a team that works well together, and building and knowing, and that's overall. And then for a writer specifically, someone who can take notes, who can implement notes they don't agree with, who will stand up for their beliefs in the story, and then if the decision goes the other way, still be professional and get it all done. Those things are all important. But also there's that undefinable something that just comes from two people who either get along or don't in person, And there's also the definable. Some people just don't like to wear deodorant, And when you rent office space for a production office, you rent a small space because you don't want to spend a lot of money on the behind-the-scenes stuff. You want to put it all on the screen. So I would never hire a writer for a project that is a go project without meeting them in person. Even if I love their script, if their script is the best thing I've ever written, that's awesome. But I mean, LA, if you want to get a script, go out and hail a cab and ask the driver for his. They're not hard to come by. So when I'm building a team, I want the best combination of good writing and a good writer. If you understand what I'm saying there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, so let's dig into Pitch Fest and Script Fest and talk about that a little bit. So maybe to start out, you can kind of just tell us sort of what it is, and for people that don't know anything about it, just kind of pitch us Pitch Fest.
Well, I'll start with Script Fest.
Okay.
We are extraordinarily proud of what we offer writers. As writers ourselves, we want to make sure that we are providing opportunities for other writers. It's our philosophy that improving spec screenwriting across the board will improve opportunities for individual spec screenwriters individually. So we make a very important part of our process that all the writers who come have opportunities to improve their craft. We have classes on structure. We have classes on character. We have classes on a good ending. We have classes on log lines, pitching, on your legal rights, on all this stuff, so that the writers who come aren't just writing one screenplay and coming into Hollywood thinking that they can become superstars. We're helping people build a career in writing. We also offer the opportunity to meet working screenwriters. Just in the last couple of years, we've had Shane Black. We had the writing staff of Better Call Saul. We had Diablo Cody this past year. We have people who are working on online series, traditional series, cable series. We have movie writers. We have fewer video game writers than I would like, but we want to explore all these opportunities for anyone to come in. We have people who we have Dave Reynolds every year who wrote Finding Nemo and The Emperor's New Groove. I mean, when you can have the guy who wrote Iron Man and the guy who wrote Lethal Weapon and the guy who wrote Finding Nemo in the same room riffing with each other, you'd never know what's going to just pop out of that situation. But then the crown jewel of it all is the Pitch Fest. The Great American Pitch Fest has been going on for 12 years, and as I said, we've been in Canada and Great Britain a little bit shorter amount of time, and we offer writers the opportunity to pitch their scripts and build that network that I was talking about. It's 120 companies typically in a typical year, pitching all day long for 5-minute meetings. Most writers get in the neighborhood of, say 12 to 25 meetings in the course of a day, and then at the cocktail party they can pitch more people. And we have a success rate when it comes to, as far as script requests are concerned, higher than 90%. People that sit down and get pitches have been prepped properly enough that you know that the executive you're sitting across from is looking for what you want, and you've learned how to pitch these people well enough that script requests just go out and go out and go out all day long. Now, whether or not those scripts get optioned or they get hired as for writing samples and so on, that's that's more between the executive and the writer themselves. We provide an opportunity for the relationship to grow, but we don't monitor it beyond there very closely.
Yeah. So let's dig into that number 12. You said 12 to 25 pitches per day. What is sort of the determining factor that might slow a writer that be closer to the 12 or 25 or keep you from pitching to all 120 of these companies?
Well, time is the factor for all 120. I mean, just doing the math quickly in my head, 120 times 5 minutes a meeting is 600 minutes. That's 10 hours. If it's just one guy and 120 meetings to go to, the main factor that slows people down is a decision on their part. It's strategy. We have a large variety of companies, not only in what they're looking for and what genre they're in and what medium they're in, but also the size of the companies themselves. This past year, we had Gersh, we've had William Morris in the past, we have Warner Brothers some years, we have Three Arts Media who do Louis, and they do It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. We have Circle of Confusion who do all sorts of things. We have the company that does Walking Dead. So we have all these big companies which sort of put stars in a lot of writers' eyes. They get dazzled and they want to pitch to these companies. And let me back it up. Our system works this way. In the main ballroom, there's 120 companies. Out in the hallway outside, there's 120 lines to represent each of those companies. And then everyone who comes gets a directory, and in the directory is a profile for each of the companies. So you show up, you look at the directory, it says Disney is in line 30, is number 30 in the directory. You get on line number 30, which says Disney, and when you walk into the room, table number 30 is Disney. So people have gotten this directory, and they look through all the different companies, and some of them are big companies like the ones I described, and some of them are smaller companies which either have, exclusive deals with some of the studios. They're managers who are just hanging out their own shingle after leaving a big firm, that kind of thing. And without that razzle-dazzle factor, those lines tend to be shorter, and so people get to pitch more of them. If people really only want to pitch the big companies, then when we had Imagine Entertainment, their line was long. And so people are missing the opportunity to pitch smaller companies. It's everyone's career. Each individual can decide how they want to do their own career as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, it makes more sense to pitch the smaller companies. If I have never sold a screenplay, what good does it do to pitch a company that has Steven Spielberg on speed dial? But people love it, and they love the opportunity to pitch these companies, and some of them have had great opportunities. I mean, we had someone come up to me, wrote me just the other day, who was at the Pitch Fest this last May, and said, I just set up an in-person meeting at William Morris, thanks to you guys. And I'm just I'm high-fiving the guy through email. It's really great, but it's not. But that's what can slow you down. Okay. People can get more than 30 if they strategize properly.
Yeah. Okay, so you said that there's some preparation. Is it like you email them a PDF document on the Friday before the Pitch Fest? Do you have some classes that say, listen, if you have this genre, you should go to these companies? What kind of prep work do you do with the writers to help them maximize these opportunities? We
advise the writers on what companies to go to individually. We also offer private consultations as part of the event where you can sit down with gurus or with experts and so on and get a lot of individualized attention. But before the event, we email everybody this directory and let them decide who they want. I mean, the directory isn't just here's the company and the table they're sitting at. It includes information like email address, you can reach the person, what they're looking for, what they've done in the past, what they're not looking for, budget ranges, what they're doing in the future, their favorite movies, general advice. So if a writer sits down and really reads that directory, they can say, okay, my A list is tables number 12, 25, and 30. My B list is tables number 10, 15, 35, whatever. And then the ones I absolutely do not want to see are the ones over here. And typically, people get enough pitches in that by the end of the day, they're saying, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to meet table 95, but I've got the time, so I might as well meet them. And we advise that because you never know. I write a horror movie. This guy's looking for a romantic comedy. I sit down with them and say, look, I don't have a romantic comedy, but just wanted to get to know you and learn about the thing. Now you've made that connection, which is important for the networking. And who knows if 2 weeks from now this guy hasn't taken another job at a company that is looking for horror, and now he's going to be thinking of you. when his boss is looking for one.
And that's never a problem from the executive standpoint. If a writer goes in there, he's got nothing but horror scripts, and they do, family scripts. The executives don't get annoyed. Well, what the hell did you send that guy in for? They don't mind people coming in pitching stuff that even though they could never make it.
I think they mind if people come in pitching stuff, saying you really got to try this. I got this movie about a zombie who only eats babies, and we're trying to do Mickey Mouse. But they don't have a problem with you sitting down and saying, tell me more about yourself, tell me more about the career, and so on. Executives, just like everybody else, love talking about themselves. And with those 5 minutes, you can either pitch your scripts, or you can pitch yourself, or you can just make a connection with somebody and say, what's your favorite movie? And then talk about that. It helps a lot to, down the line, if I've written a family movie, to call the guy or email him and say, I've got something that's right for you, can I send it to you? Rather than having to go to another pitch fest and start from ground zero. If you're on the second step instead of the first, that puts you ahead of everybody who's on the first step or the zero step. So don't go in and pitch something bad, just have a conversation.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's nice tip. So let's talk about the classes a little bit with the Script Fest. You mentioned someone like Shane Black. Maybe you can talk a little bit specifically about what these classes are and kind of who teaches them and what people can get out of them.
Sure. We have a combination of working writers, producers, agents and managers, and gurus. And it changes from year to year. I mean, every year there are new people sort of entering the scene with new structure ideas and so on, which we are happy to embrace. We almost always have someone from the Save the Cat organization. We had Blake before he died, and we bring in Jose Solerio most years now. Pilar Alessandro from On the Page is in every year. But then the working screenwriters are the ones that tend to attract more people even than the gurus, I think. Pitching classes accepted. People love to pitch and they love to learn how. But when you find writers, as in all industries and in every aspect of our industry, Ashley, I'm sure you've seen it, is some people are thrilled to give back, and some people are not really all that thrilled to give back. And it's fine. People work really, really hard to get where they are, and if they don't want to spend their Saturday afternoon talking to a bunch of newbies, that's totally fine. But you meet guys like Shane. I mean, you say we're going to have you in a class on a panel from 1 to 2:30, and then he's still there at 5 o'clock just chatting with people because he just wants to share the knowledge that he has and the joy for writing. And as the guy who typically is on stage interviewing Shane Black, he's the best because I say, hey, Shane, how's it going? And then 45 minutes later, he's done answering the question. And they say, that was a great interview, Bob, and I didn't really do anything. But it's great when you find someone like Shane or like Diablo or like the Better Call Saul staff who are saying, we remember what it was like to be where you are, other writers, and we're happy to help you to reach down and help pull you up along on the ladder. It's really inspirational.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there's the pitching and there's the classes. I noticed on your website there's also some luncheons and some other things. So maybe you can just talk briefly about sort of some of these other things that go on aside from the classes and the pitching.
Sure. I mean, we try to give every opportunity possible for networking to go on while we're there. It's important not just to meet executives, agents, managers, working writers. It's also very important to meet your fellow writers. We've had writing partnerships come out of our event. We've had writing groups formed out of the event. We've had, we work with Script Chat and we work with some other networking organizations to sort of build it up. And the luncheons are because people need to eat. And why force people to scatter over to McDonald's and Starbucks all over the map when we can have them there talking to each other and learning about their writing experience. So we have the luncheons, we have the private consults, we have parties each night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. We have cocktail parties. Most of these things are included in a basic ticket, but some of them there's an extra cost for, just to cover our own costs. And it turns out to be a lot of fun. I mean, I've made professional connections and personal friends out of this opportunity just to like grab a drink and say, hey, how's it going? So, I mean, writers tend to be isolated a lot of the time, so getting them to sort of come out of the shell and say, and just walk up to somebody and say hello and shake hands, sometimes is a little bit of a chore. But the writers that we've met who have been successful have that balance between good writing and the ability to be an interesting person to be around. So it's a good opportunity to practice if you're not good at that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's dig into some actual pitching. I mean, you've been doing this for, as you said, over 20 events over the 12 years. So maybe you can just talk about some actual tips, some things. Let's start with the things that you see people doing wrong, and then we'll talk about maybe the things that people do right. But what are some things that you see writers come in and they want to pitch to an executive and they're doing wrong? You tell writers, yeah, don't do this, this, and this.
In the construct of the pitch fest, people hear the words 5 minutes and plan a 5-minute pitch. That is always a mistake. You don't want to give a 5-minute speech to somebody about your script. I'm a writer myself. I know that the instinct is, if I could have told you it in 90 seconds, I wouldn't have told it to you in 90 pages. But it's unfortunately the reality of the game, especially in a pitch fest where the executive is hearing 100 pitches in a day. He doesn't want to just be talked at. He's going to go glazed over. I think keeping your story, think of it like a conversation. You got to hook the guy, hook the executive, and then let the executive talk and ask questions. So the pieces of advice I would give is make it short and know your script, both from a story perspective and from a structure perspective and from a character perspective. They will say, what happens at the end of Act 1 as a question. And if you don't know the answer to that question, they're going to assume you don't know your craft very well. But the most successful pitch I ever had on a personal level was 10 words long. The script I just finished the first draft of, and I have it out to get notes and bring it back, I expect to be a one-word pitch. And I'll say the pitch, and in that one word, it will be the title of the movie. It'll be the title of the movie. It'll illustrate the tone of the movie. It'll illustrate the genre of the movie. And immediately, the executive will either say, I want to hear more, or no way, not for me. So why waste anyone's time if one word will do the trick? I know plenty of people who say, okay, on page 1, here's what, blah, 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 and then 4.5 minutes later they're saying, and then at the end of Act 1, this happens, and executives just want to know. They want to know what they can't sell it to an audience or to their boss if you can't sell it to them quickly and efficiently. So make it short, make it snappy, and use your own personality. If it's a funny script, be funny. If it's a scary script, convey that with your voice. If it's romantic, don't be afraid to say so. If you are nervous about expressing your personality or just going in with one word or whatever, include this information. The protagonist, the title, the genre, the protagonist, the goal, and what obstacles stand in the way. And get it all in under a minute if you can, so that they can ask you questions, and then it builds. If they're asking you questions, that means they're interested, and if you can answer them, they'll request the script.
Yeah, yeah. What's the one-word pitch? Can you tell us what that one word is?
Okay. Hitlersaurus.
There you go. That is a good pitch. Excellent.
It was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah,
I haven't pitched it to anybody yet, so I can't tell you how successful it is. But the 10-word pitch was, I got a request every single time. It was, the movie eventually got made under, the same concept got made under another title. I wasn't ripped off or anything. It was just parallel, whatever. But I sat down with people and I said, vampires in Alaska. And they'd go, huh. And I'd say, 6 months of darkness. And they'd go, oh. And I'd say, it's called Frostbite. And they'd say, send it to me. Because I told them the concept, the hook. I told them why it works. And it's called Frostbite, just showed that it was sort of a funny kind of, like, there was a tongue-in-cheek element to it. It wasn't trying to be, Nosferatu or anything.
Yeah.
And if that's what they were looking for, they'd say, send it to me. If that's not what they're looking for, they'd say, not for us, but I really loved your pitch, And so if you can get comfortable with pitching, you become less nervous about what the actual words are that you say and more about the joy of writing. Joy is contagious. If you sit down with someone and go, oh, I've had the hardest time with this script. It's awful. Don't waste your time. That's what they're going to believe. But if you sit down and say, oh, man, I just saw Mad Max Fury Road. It is so crazy. It's so much energy and excitement. Let's go. I don't care if they hate action movies. You're joyfully contagious, and they'll start thinking, okay, maybe I will. And it's the same thing with scripts. What you bring to the table is what you're going to see sort of reflected back at you a lot of the time.
Yeah. No, I like your pitch for the vampire movie. It really illustrates a very clear hook. And as you say, they're either going to like it or they're not going to like it. So your recommendation is about 1 minute of pitch and then basically 4 minutes of letting them ask questions. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, I mean, if you can have 2 seconds of pitching, I think that's of your initial pitch. Mm-hmm. That's great. I mean, that gives you time in the beginning. Say, hey, I'm Bob. Nice to meet you. How's it going today? Good. Yeah. Do you need a bottle of water or something? I can swing by. I know you've been talking all day. Hey, I saw that your company produced, Ex Machina. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. It's a little sleeper hit. I hope it doesn't get buried by the Avengers. Yeah, me too. I really was happy to work on it. I'm really proud of it. Hey, while we're talking, let me just say this to you. Hitlersaurus. They go, what the hell is Hitlersaurus? And I say, well, they took Hitler's brain, they put it in a T-Rex, and it rampages across Europe. In the end, he has to battle cyborg FDR for the free world, and they say, okay, that's just so ridiculous. I have to spend time writing it. I have to spend time reading it. And then you just make sure your first 3 pages are awesome, so they keep turning the pages. Mm-hmm. But it's that's how I see pitches going. Maybe a minute and a half of getting to know you. 30-second pitch, 10-second pitch, 1 minute pitch, followed by questions.
Okay. So then what can we expect from these questions? You just said what's your first act break? Maybe you could rattle off a few other questions just so writers can maybe prepare for the potential questions that they're going to get from these executives.
Sure. It's hard to prepare for because the questions are there are a wide range of questions depending on the individual needs of the executive or of the company that he's there representing. It becomes important for writers to listen for what they're actually asking beyond the words that they're using. If someone says, what happens at the end of the first act, they could really be asking, do you really know your craft well enough to create a story in a way that I can sell? If they say, what happens at the end, that's a direct question, what happens at the end? The answer to that question is, what happens at the end? The answer to that question is not, hey, if you read the script, you'll find out. That's terrible advice. That's like trying to buy a car and the person not letting you test drive it. But other questions could include, is there a partner that's right for Reese Witherspoon? And the answer is always yes, because the person's not asking is just for general knowledge. The person's asking that because they have some way of getting a script to Reese Witherspoon. They could say the question, what if at the end instead of X happening, what if Y happens instead? Even if you hate the Y idea, they could be just sort of testing how do you take notes and how would you be in a story meeting. So you need to say that's an interesting idea, but what happens earlier in the script sort of pays off here. So and then you need to try to determine what they're trying to accomplish by that note. Are they trying to cut budget? Are they trying to use a location they already have access to or whatever? So you need to say, but you could do this instead. Make another suggestion that hopefully satisfies you creatively, but also achieves the goal they're trying to reach from it. So to answer your question, it's hard to prepare other than just knowing everything you can about your story, about your characters, about structure. It's important to be able to answer those questions because executives are going to have different priorities. There is many different opinions and approaches as there are people working in Hollywood and people not working in Hollywood, which is an even bigger number. But it's very important that you just know your stuff. And if they come up with a question you don't know, don't try to wing it. Just say, I'm really not sure how to answer that question, but I'll tell you this, and come up with something positive about the script.
Yeah. It sounds like you just got to get in there and mix it up with the executives and kind of see what happens, and you'll get better at that as you do more of it, sort of thinking on your feet. Let's talk about the different companies and how a writer might choose which companies to pitch. One of the things I've done a lot of cold query letters in my time, and one of my first early jobs was with a production company, and I can't remember. It was they had produced that Sean Connery movie where he was the voice of a dragon.
Yeah.
I can't remember even what it was called. But anyways, they had produced that movie. So they were just inundated with pitches that were similar to that, with this CGI monster. And it's like, they didn't want to do any more of those. It's like, oh, we already did that. They wanted something. And so I've always found it difficult to really predict, just because a company's already done these movies, and I get that with my own service. People are like, well, can I just submit my query letter to companies that do comedies? And I'm like, well, you can do that. You can go on IMDb Pro and you can research these companies, but I don't know that really is going to tell you what they are looking for right now. So maybe you can talk about a little bit like how you choose which companies of this list of 120, which ones you should go to and which ones you shouldn't.
Sure. In the directory, we ask specifically, what are you looking to produce? So that helps.
Yeah.
That's what. So they're telling you what they're looking for. But in a more general sense, IMDb Pro is a tremendously valuable resource. I agree. But also valuable is getting a knowledge of the industry as a whole. The first thing I do every morning after I get a bowl of cereal is sit down with that bowl of cereal and read Deadline. Deadline.com is because there's Deadline.com, there's Variety, there's Hollywood Reporter, there's all these Hollywood industry publications that are online now that you start to gain an awareness of where the industry as a whole is going, but also you learn when an agent leaves William Morris to hang his shingle someplace else. You learn when HBO wants to move away from The Sopranos and towards Curb Your Enthusiasm. You learn when Netflix is saying, okay, we're going to do Orange is the New Black, which is amazing. Then we're going to do House of Cards. Then we're going to do Orange is the New Black. And then then all of a sudden they subtly, but you just have to read to learn it, sort of switch their tune from these original things like House of Cards, which is an adaptation, and Orange is the New Black, which is an adaptation, to picking up actual shows. They picked up Arrested Development. They picked up. I don't know if they got Mindy Project or if I think someone else got the Mindy Project. Hulu picked up the Mindy Project, but shows that have existing fan bases and all. And so, but they're still doing original stuff. They're still doing BoJack Horseman, which is really wild and out there. But if I'm going to go to Netflix with a pitch, I'm not going to go to them and say I have Battlestar Galactica unless I have actual Battlestar Galactica, because they're picking up shows with built-in fan bases. And also you get to know about the individual players. A great piece of advice that my producing partner, Signe Olenek, gives a lot of the time is learn about the people who you're going to be pitching and learn what's important to them. And in the age of Google, you can do anything. If you're saying to yourself, okay, I want to pitch to Circle of Confusion, you go to IMDb Pro, you can learn who the players are at Circle of Confusion, and then you can Google those names and you'll find here's such and so at the fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Foundation. Here's such and so at the Producers Guild Awards, standing next to John Smith, and they seem to really get along. Maybe they want to work together and so on. So when you know more specifics about the person, he's really interested in this particular charity or whatever, that's an opportunity for you to say, if you have appropriate scripts, say, look, I think this can really raise awareness. Or you can say, I saw that you really wanted to work with Mindy Kaling, and I have a script here that would be great for her. Would you mind taking a look at it, or so on? It's a question of doing your homework. We are in an industry where everybody thinks they can do the job. People, you go out on the street right now and say, do you think you could write a screenplay? And they would say, have you seen the crap made today? Of course I can write a screenplay. It's not true. But you're still in competition with 50 million people, including people with the unfair advantages of, being Tom Cruise's dog walker, which is the way in sometimes, So get to know the people you're talking about and think of them as people. Don't think of the industry as this monolith you have to sort of chip away at. Find someone who you want to work with, like the same way you would try to find a wife. You don't find someone and try to beg and plead for them to marry you. It's like someone who you're in it together, And I think that's the best way to get your movie made and have a satisfying experience at the same time.
Yeah. So are there any types of scripts that you see working better in this kind of a pitch fest format? And what I mean by that, like on Inktip, it's kind of those lower budgeted, independent films. I mean, I don't think Inktip has a lot of success selling $100 million blockbuster scripts. I think, like on the Blacklist, it seems like the scripts that get a lot of notice on the Blacklist are more of these sort of, dramatic, a lot of like these sort of historical dramas, which may not necessarily work in the marketplace, but they get some hype on Blacklist. So is there any sort of a pattern to the scripts from the success stories you've seen? Is there any pattern to the scripts you've seen that come through the pitch fest? Some scripts work better for whatever reason.
It's a business we're in. So if the movies you love cost $300 million to make, and the movies you want to write cost $300 million to make, you need to prove to the world that you are worth having someone give a $300 million to. That's why low-budget movies work best have the greatest success rate with regards to options and sales for brand new rookie writers, is because you're a much lower risk proposition for the business people. If you have a $300 million script, with a few very rare exceptions. J.K. Rowling had never written a script before, but she also had 7 Harry Potter books that had made trillions of dollars across the world to prove that there was an audience there for her projects. If you happen to know Brad Pitt, you're going to get more money if you get Brad Pitt to attach himself to your movie. I mean, that's just reality. But these lower budget scripts I personally think creativity thrives under duress. The more restrictions you have, the more you need to be creative about solving your creative problems, and I think scripts are better for it. I mean, I mentioned Ex Machina earlier, pretty low budget, really dealt with some heady topics, some really smart sci-fi. Last night I watched one of the movies from the Duplass brothers, The One I Love, which is pretty new, I think, but it's really interesting, talking about relationships and love and how people are crazy in love in the beginning and how they sort of grow out of love and how to sort of recapture that in a really interesting and fun way. Very low budget, pretty much one location or two. So it doesn't have to be horror. It doesn't have to be sci-fi, but low budget helps in that way. If your goal is to write this $300 million blockbuster, think of those lower budget movies as stepping stones to that goal. You don't have to say, I'm going to sell one and wash your hands of it and that's it. I think that it's very important that you recognize that you're still striving towards that goal of writing your dream project. But even the Wachowskis, they wrote The Matrix, and the Weinstein said, I can't give you this kind of money for The Matrix. Go show me that you're worth it. So then they went and wrote Bound, which is an amazingly great film noir with very few locations and really well shot, and it made a ton of money for them relative to the budget. And lo and behold, they got the Matrix greenlit. Christopher Nolan made Memento before he made Batman. You have to sort of earn your stripes before no one just gives you stripes. Stripes are something you buy.
Yeah. And I wonder if we could talk about the type of people that you've seen have the most success at Pitch Fest. I mean, it just seems like the most logical thing, like someone who's done a lot of sales, whether that be telemarketing sales, but even in-person sales. A professional salesman probably would be a real good candidate to be able to do very, very well at a conference like this. So maybe you can talk about just some of the people, backgrounds and who you see has the most success from that perspective.
I would say a good sales background is helpful. And if you were to take some of these, habits of highly effective people or something courses, that would be very useful in your pitching, but not necessarily just the, hi, how are you guy, not the slimy 600 teeth grin when he smiles. It's also the listening aspect of it. It's the joy and enthusiasm aspect of it. And it's continuing to follow up and not just following up the query letter saying, I sent you my script 6 weeks ago. Have you had a chance to read it yet? You say, we've had, a dozen, 2 dozen people who have either come to the event or who we worked with directly, consulting with on their scripts or so on, who made the quarterfinals of the Page Awards and Nichols, which were both announced last week. And they're part of my network. I mean, I don't consider them they can't get my movies produced, but I consider them part of my network. I don't just write to them and say, hey, we have this new event coming up. Do you want to buy a ticket? I see their name on that list and I write them and say, congratulations, that's awesome. Good for you. And the same thing happens in reverse when, the Better Call Saul guys were here were at Script Fest last year. You better believe we sent them an email saying congratulations on all those Emmy nominations. It's not just what you can do for me. It's recognizing success in other people, and it's no selfish motives. I'm really glad seeing people I really like succeeding, and I'm even glad seeing people I don't like very well succeeding if their projects are really awesome. So it's not a question of I'm working on my screenwriting for an hour today. It's a career. You got to be shooting off tweets saying, Joe Blow just got an Emmy nomination. I'm so proud of him. I met him at Pitch Fest, or I'm so proud of him. I met him at lunch, or whatever. You never know where you're going to find that opportunity to make more friends. One of the execs we had at one of the events who isn't looking for anything that I write. We happen to follow each other on Twitter, and I just tweeted a quote from Midnight Run, my favorite comedy of all time, by the way. Tweeted a quote from Midnight Run just for fun one day, and then he responds with another tweet from Midnight Run. 4 hours later, we're still coming up with quotes from Midnight Run to tweet to each other. And now all of a sudden I have this guy in in my network, and when I see them at Pitch Fest, I'm like, hey, I got 2 words for you, and they and we're like buddies now, and that's what you want. So you need that personality and that aspect of sales where someone can sit with you and make you feel like you've known each other their whole life is much more effective than someone who says, buy the free undercoating for your car,
Yeah. So are there some specific success stories you can talk about, some people that have optioned or sold something through the Pitch Fest?
Sure. I mentioned all the people who advanced in the Page and the Nichols, which is our latest thing we're very proud of. And the fellow who got his agent meeting, not this past Pitch Fest, but the year before, we had a guy who had 2 of his scripts optioned by the same company. One of them's already been produced and is out. His name is Scotty Mullen, and he is an amazing writer who has a tremendous lot of fun and also has that personality where you're chatting with him, and I don't care if your favorite movie is Remains of the Day, he'll sit down and say the words zombie cheerleaders to you, and you'll go, I have got to read this and see it, and I want you to be the best man at my wedding. He just has that sort of engaging personality,
Mm-hmm.
But he sold it to the Asylum, and okay, say what you want about Sharknado. It makes a ton of money, and they get movies produced fast.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome. Hitlersaurus, I'm going to send out to them as soon as it's ready, as a matter of fact. So we have them. We have the first Pitch Fest ever attended by Jeannie Bowerman, who runs Script Chat. And
yeah. No, I know Jeannie. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We were her first Pitch Fest, and we still remain friends to this day. I consider her a success story, and she based on what she learned from Pitch Fest, from Script Fest, she went out and she talked to the Slavery by Any Other Name, the Pulitzer Prize winning author, and got the opportunity to adapt that script. So it's hard to quantify success stories exactly because so many of them come out of writing opportunities, representation, that kind of thing. People feel like it's a failure at a Pitch Fest if they don't whip out the checkbook right away and write you a big, fat, juicy check. But that's not how it works. It's not how any of the industry works. You meet people, you get to know them, and then 6 months later, after having sort of talked back and forth, they say, let me give you an opportunity here. So those, to use a term from the 1980s, those Rolodexes that people are building are the value that we offer writers.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a minute about the executives, and we talked about this in sort of the pre-interview, and so maybe we can talk about that for a second. One of the big knocks that I hear on Pitch Fests is, hey, these executives are all very junior executives. They're not the decision makers. And maybe you can speak to that, because I really feel like people are very short-sighted when they talk like that. These junior executives are going to be the senior executives. It might take 5 years, but that's the kind of trajectory of a screenwriting career, is looking 5 or 10 years down the road. So maybe you can talk about just who exactly are these executives and what kind of real value can the writers get from these executives?
Yeah, I think of that mindset the same way that I think of, I'm a Boston Red Sox fan, and so I think of baseball fans in the same way. The opening day of the season, your team loses, and they're like, oh, that's it, season's over, ruined. Then there's still 161 more games to go. It's a marathon,
Mm-hmm.
and not a sprint. And these folks who say, I don't want to talk to junior executives, especially when they're junior themselves, or rookies themselves, I think are not really taking a realistic look at the opportunities they have. These junior executives are only junior executives in a company because they intend to become senior executives at a company. And when they're senior executives, everybody in the world is going to be shaking their hand and stabbing them in the back at the same time. When you're getting on board with someone who you and this junior executive have the same goals. They want to find that perfect script to bring to their boss to earn them that promotion. You want to provide that perfect script to someone who's, even though you don't have that track record, to say this is great anyway and run with it. You have the same goals. To say you don't want to speak to a junior executive is like me running out of gas and saying I don't want to speak to a gas station attendant. It doesn't make any sense, and so they will advance their careers with you and you will advance your career with them, and so you climb the ladder together instead of hoping that somebody all the way up on the top of the ladder will throw you a rope and pull you up. It seems like a much more effective strategy to me. I mean, granted, there are pitching events out there who junior executive really means the nephew of the janitor and who can't really get anything made. But at our event anyway, when we say junior executive, we mean the assistant to the development executive or the assistant to the agent or a junior agent or something like that who has, if they can't make the decisions, they have the ear of the person who can. Mm-hmm. And that's what you need to bridge that gap if you're a writer.
Yeah, for sure. I had a meeting a few months ago and she was literally like the receptionist slash assistant to the senior executive there. And she's like trying to find scripts to bring to her boss so that she can do exactly what you're saying. And, they're on the Sony lot. And it's like, those are exactly the types of people that, you are going to meet. And one day she will find that script, and hopefully you can ride her coattails, as her career goes up, your career go up with it. So.
And you know what else? If you get to the high ranking development executive, she's the one reading the script anyway. Your assistant is the one that they'll say, read this and tell me what you think. So why not just go right to the horse's mouth?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things in the pre-interview we talked about a little bit, how Pitch Fest fit into the overall marketing plan. Maybe you can talk about that. And you're a writer too, so I wonder, what other marketing channels do you use as a screenwriter, and how do you see Pitch Fests fitting into sort of the overall marketing plan that a screenwriter might use?
I do everything I can, and I don't do enough. It's go to Facebook, and if you're not on Facebook, first of all, get out of 1985. But go to Facebook, and on the search function, type in the word screenwriting, and join every single group that comes up. You're building a network. You're going to find people, and it can sort of fill up your feed, and you can get a bunch of people who sort of spam out 6 posts, their same post to 6 different boards. Do that on Facebook. Do that on Twitter. Follow every screenwriter you like on Twitter, every company you like, screenwriters you don't like, people who made movies and TV shows that you like. Even some shows have Twitter accounts for the characters themselves. Follow that. Follow everything. Read it. Read Deadline every day. Send emails congratulating people on successes, or even if something's a failure, you can send an email or some sort of a tweet or something. If you see a movie one weekend that is great, but no one else goes and sees it, the people that made that movie are going to find tremendous value in a fan saying, so 200 million people are just wrong because they missed on the greatest movie, and this is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's and if you can join any communities on I don't know, I'm not all that familiar with Instagram and with some of the other ones. I'm pretty confident in saying Google Plus isn't going to help you very much, but everything else, join whatever communities you can and participate in them. Reddit has a screenwriting subreddit, just participate in them too. Don't just read and lurk. Say, I saw this movie and I thought this twist in the script was really great, or I just finished a scene, can you read it? And the other piece of advice, never stop writing. If you don't have a project you're interested in, there's an organization out of London called Create 50. That's with 50, and they're doing a project now which is going to be 50 short films kind of strung together, and they're soliciting 2-page shorts to be part of this. Read up on it, see what the details are, and do it. It costs $5 to submit it, and maybe you're going to have the thing in the movie, and it forces you to keep oil in the engine, Mm-hmm. So, and you're going to meet other writers, and you're going to meet other producers, and Ted Talley, who wrote Silence of the Lambs, is one of the judges on this thing. You think if he likes your script, you think you can't sort of turn that spark into a flame. It's important just to not think my destination is here and I'm here and it's a straight line. You have to sort of fill everything in mm-hmm. and hope that opportunities sort of arise and sort of grow where you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, for sure. So I always like to just wrap up the interviews by asking, how can people follow along with you? You can mention your Twitter handle. Obviously, you can mention the ScriptFest website and that kind of thing. I'll get everything and link to it in the show notes. But is there something that you're particularly active, whether it be a blog or Facebook or Twitter, whatever you feel comfortable sharing?
Our Twitter handle is @thepitchfest.
Okay. I
personally am at PitchFestBob. Scriptfest.com is where we do most of our updates and so on, and we're starting to try to build a newsletter which is going to be all content, no advertising, for people to sort of learn how to improve their craft and so on. We have our Facebook page is GAPF just search for the Great American Pitch Fest, it'll come up. And any writers who want to pitch us ideas or send us log lines, you can send them directly to info@scriptfest.com.
And what would be the purpose of sending you a log line? As a producer, you might read it and want to produce it?
As a producer, we might want to read the script and see if we want to produce it. even if it's something that we are either unable or uninterested in producing, but we know a producer who'd be interested in it, we'd be happy to make an introduction. I mean, we might want to read the script first to make sure that we're not vouching for someone who doesn't have their craft in order yet, but
that's very generous. You're going to get a lot of emails.
That's okay. Building that network is what it's all about. Both, we're at the same level as I am, and earlier and later. It's important to build the whole community. You know what I mean?
Yeah, perfect. And maybe you can just tell us the dates of your Canadian, your UK, and your US, just roughly, because I know we're recording this in late July of 2015. People will be listening to this forever, but maybe just the rough dates of when those events take place, so people kind of know what to plan around.
Sure, we're planning the London Script Fest is part of the London Screenwriters Festival. That's every October. We're also planning on something this October of 2015, to sort of have several smaller events through the course of the year for Script Fest in LA. And then our big LA event is in the spring every year, late May, early June, depending on availability at the hotel. That's the one with 120 companies and 2 full days of classes and all kinds of crazy opportunities there. So that'll be in May or June. We're just working on the contract now with the hotel. Once we get it signed, we'll make an announcement right away so people can start booking their flights.
Perfect, Bob. This has been a great interview. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot about it. I've never done a pitch fest. I've always wanted to try one out. So this has been educational for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people as well. So I really appreciate your taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks, Ashley. And come on out next year. We'll give you a ticket on the house.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Bob. I appreciate it.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Just want to mention 2 things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters get their scripts into the hands of producers and sell their screenplays. First, we've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit 1 logline per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, we have about 160 producers who have signed up to receive it. These are producers who are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/select and you can learn more about how this newsletter works. And secondly, we're now fielding leads from producers for screenwriters. We're doing a lot of outreach to try and bring in requests from producers for screenwriters. Last week, we had more than 10 paid screenwriting leads. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or who are actively looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up for SYS Select, you will get these emailed directly to you several times per week. Here are a couple of real examples from last week's leads. We had a Swedish production company looking for something that could be shot in Sweden. This is a very niche lead, but if you have something that would work for a Swedish production company, this would be a great lead to submit to. They were open on genre. They had a couple of suggestions of movies that they liked, but they were pretty open on genre, but they just wanted something that could use the breathtaking Swedish landscape as sort of the backdrop for this film. We had a production company in Beverly Hills looking for features in any genre, but they wanted scripts that could be made on a smaller budget. This is a real reoccurring theme. There's a lot of feature film production these days, especially for feature films that could be made on a modest budget. We had a production company looking for action, adventure, or thriller scripts that could resonate with both a Chinese audience as well as a U.S. audience. I've mentioned this numerous times on the podcast before. There's a lot of production funding coming out of China right now, so there's a lot of films that need to play for Chinese audiences. So if you have something that could be a crossover. One pitch that I got from a producer several months ago as sort of an example of one of these films was it was a Chinese mafia script, kind of like Godfather, but instead of, Italian immigrants coming to New York City in the early 1900s, it was Chinese immigrants coming to San Francisco and rising up in the Chinese mob. And that's something that, it would play well to Chinese audiences. It potentially could play well to American audiences. So that was one example. It was a book that had been written, and the producer was talking to me about potentially adapting that book into a screenplay. So that was sort of an example, I think, of what these types of leads are looking for when they say they want something that resonates resonates with Chinese audiences as well as U.S. audiences. We had a bunch of leads for short scripts, comedies, dramas, thrillers. There are a lot of producers looking for shorts, so if you have some shorts, our leads are a great way to meet these producers. Some of these producers are even paying for shorts. You're not going to make a lot of money for short, $100, $200, maybe up to $500 for a short script, but you can get it produced, and there is sometimes some budget for these scripts. Again, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. Shorts are a great way to get your career started, a great way to get into film festivals, a great way to get IMDb credits. Anyway, that's just a small smattering of the leads from last week. A lot of these leads are still very much active, so if you join SYS Select now, you can still submit to them. And of course, we'll bring more new leads in the coming week as well. To sign up, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/select. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Jalmari Hollander, who wrote and directed Big Game, starring Samuel L. Jackson. We dig into his career and how he eventually got into a position to write and direct a movie that stars a big Hollywood star like Samuel L. Jackson. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Bob. I get a lot of questions from people asking me about these various online services. There's not just online services, just various services that cater to screenwriters. I just did my webinar, which I went through all of these various services. If there's one thing I can say from my own career as a screenwriter, and please do look me up on IMDb. You can see my credits and see what I've done if you haven't already done that. The one thing that's really, I can say, has been a big part of any options and sales that I've had, is that I just go out and I try a lot of things. I've never been super skeptical. Well, gee, is this going to work? And this sort of, paralysis analysis where you sit there and overthink things. And, I get screenwriters saying, well, gee, do pitch fest work? Or gee, does this work? And it's like, the best way you're going to be able to figure out if these things work is by going and doing them. And yes, sometimes they are going to cost a little bit of money. And yes, sometimes you're going to feel like you wasted your money. It's not going to have the desired effects. But every single thing, every single online channel, whether it be PitchFest or Inktip or my own SYS Select, everything is not going to work equally for everyone. And there's subtle differences between each one of these channels, and it's hard to really quantify why something worked for one person and not another. I mean, for myself, as I said, over my course of my career, I've tried lots and lots of things. For whatever reason, cold query letters to producers seems to work for me, but that's not necessarily going to be the angle for most other people or for every other person. So you've just got to get out there and try stuff. That's really, I would say, my biggest piece of advice. Try everything, see what works, and figure out where you fit in and figure out what you do well, and see if there's not some channel that can fit in with your skills and your talents. And just like Bob just described, if you're good at pitching in person, if you're a people person, if you're a talker, I mean, these are exactly the people you want to meet. You want to get into something like a pitch fest. You want to talk to the people, pitch them your idea, listen to them, talk to them about what they're looking for. Even if they don't request any scripts, if you were to go to one of these pitch fests, spend a minute or two, you get 5 minutes, spend a minute or two pitching your thing, and then just listen and follow up with questions. Well, what kind of material are you looking for? What's an example of a script that you like from last year or 2 years ago? What's an example of a script that you would really, really like to have produced or like to have found at one of these pitch fests? And the producers will tell you, these executives will tell you, you can look up those movies, you can read them, and you can just kind of get that out of it. Even if they don't request script, or even if they do request script and they don't buy the script, if you just go and see people and talk to people and learn something about what real development executives are looking for, that will be worth the price of admission. And these things can sort of subtly help you as you go through your next spec script and decide, what am I going to write next? These sort of subtle things, and they're not even always like conscious, but just having those things in the back of your mind can really, really help you just decide, hey, what's the best spec script for me to write next? I've got, this list of 5 or 10 or 20 ideas. Which one should I write? And this sort of education can really help you. And over the course of, months and years and decades, that can really help you start to hone your skills and hone what spec scripts you write. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.